All right, good morning, everyone. And I'm getting a little bit of feedback here, so we're just working on the technology. Can everybody hear me? All right, sounds good. Thank you. And I apologize for the delay in getting started. Kelly, you were saying what? I-70 is closed, I believe? Is that what you said? All right, so we have a sparse number of people that are here, but quite a few of you online. So I appreciate you coming. And then also there's a new sign-in procedure here at MSDE, so it took us a little bit of time for us to get connected to the network. So I think we've got all of that worked out now. So I'm just double checking to make sure I'm in online so I can see everybody. And I think we're ready to go. So again, pardon the delay. And I've got yeah, there we go. Okay. That's a little better. All right. So again, thank you for the delay. And welcome in. Hope everybody's, if you're in public school and you're coming to the end of school, I hope all that's going well. Those of you that are aiding everybody and closing things down for the summer, good luck with all of that, and it's great to see everybody. All right, so we have our call to order and recognition of guests. Are there any guests? Frank, I see, is in the audience. Nice to see you from MSDE. And not seeing anyone else. We go to our next part, which is public comment. Kelly, do we have any public comment today?
Not today.
All right, not today. All right, sounds good. Moving right along, we're making up for lost time then. So we've got our state board update. Is Hannah here? Okay, go right ahead.
Good morning.
And good morning.
So I am going to share a little bit about what the state board was up to in our May meeting and preview a little bit of what's coming down the pike in June. So our May meeting was a crowd favorite because it ended very early. So it was a light month in terms of workload, but we will be making up for that this summer. So May was a really exciting month because we got to celebrate our 24 Teachers of the Year. We also had a couple of COMAR items come through. The alternative ways to earn a high school diploma. So that was that we adopted. We adopted that on the consent agenda. And that was really just to expand some language access and to expand tests to include those that are not the kind of trademarked GED only test. And the other big COMAR item was we approved for permission to publish the criteria for disqualification for substitute teachers. And so I believe that also came through PSTEB. So that is just included some additional specifications on certain offenses for substitute teachers that would require them to be disqualified. In June, we have a pretty hefty month coming our way. We are going to be digging into the Summer of Standards, as we are calling it here. So we are working our way to adopt new math, literacy, and social studies standards. Social studies will be coming in June, and that will be coming through our Education Policy Committee next week. And we will be preparing to review and adopt the ELA and math standards in July, but those will come to the Education Policy Committee as well in both June and July, because this is such a big moment and these standards have not been updated since the Common Core era. I believe we are also adopting in our other committee, we are adopting or I should say, acknowledging the Blueprints Special Education Work Group recommendations. So those are coming to our Education Transformation and Finance Committee. And so we will get a presentation on those as there was an addendum with a kind of prioritization work plan released late last month. And so we are excited to dig into that after we know a long process and a really detailed process for developing that work plan. So we are excited for those. In June, we are also going to be recognizing our Principals of the Year. So that's an exciting time for us. And then lastly, the last big update relevant here is the COMAR for the induction program is coming back to the board. And so we will be voting to publish that COMAR. So I think that is about it. Let me know if you have any questions, and thank you for your time.
All right, thank you so much for the update. Are there any questions or comments? All right, hearing none. Thank you so much, Ms. Oakley. We appreciate that. And also, if you didn't notice, this was also sent out electronically with all kinds of links and so forth in it, so you can always access that. And we always appreciate that, so thank you for all the hard work on that. All right, and I don't believe we don't have the May minutes. Those will be at the next meeting, correct? All right. And of course, later on, we'll set the July agenda. We'll also have to talk about whether we want to have a July meeting. Traditionally, we usually don't, so we'll expect that either in July or August, depending on how that goes. All right, so that brings us to the communication update. And the only thing I have on the agenda was we talked about this board had entertained and passed a resolution to ask if we might be able to inquire and get some more information about why teachers are leaving, and any information that we could get on that, and if that information wasn't readily available, that we might begin to think about producing an instrument to get that. And that, of course, came off the heels of a very good presentation that we had on the PSTEB program, but also looking at what happens when people come in with a conditional certificate and how there has been a decline, of course, in people leaving literally for about the last 5-6 years. So that was very concerning. So on the heels of that, as a board, we often have to always balance the COMAR that we're creating to make sure that we don't exacerbate teacher shortages and that we make sure teachers have what they need as skills to stay in the classroom. So as we begin to think and tinker around with teacher induction programs, and we look at teacher preparation programs and so forth, are we giving people what they need to stay in the classroom? So figuring out why people leave and getting hard data on that, not anecdotal, but hard data, to summarize the discussion of this board, all of us thought was very important. So what that did was it precipitated a letter, and I really want to thank Dr. Shockley for having written a draft for us, and you have that. So I know Kelly I believe you sent that out on email, and you got that late because we just sent it. But everybody else who's here in person has a paper copy of it. So what I'd like to do is just give folks time to take a look at that. Maybe, when I don't see a break on the agenda, but we'll take a break. And then as we come back, what I'd like to do is, barring any objections to it, we'll go ahead and give that to Kelly to take to Dr. Liggett and or Dr. Wright and Mr. Liggett. All right, so when you get a chance, and it's, again, you might want to look at that during the break, we'll kind of come back to that a little bit later. Debbie.
Thanks. Can you, I just sent a message, but I don't think there was an attachment.
Okay, all right, so it's been resent.
Thank
And
you.
again, if you're thinking, wait a minute, I missed that, this is something that we just brought forward, so it wasn't in the initial packet that Kelly sent out. So you're just getting it. So that's why I give you a little bit of time, maybe during the break, you can take a look at it.
And Mr. Hornbeck, I just want to point out that if we could remove the word interim before state superintendent.
Okay,
Thank you.
that's great. Well, that's a good comment. Oh, yeah, that's right. Good spot. I didn't see that. Yeah, that's a good one. Want to make sure we get that right. All right, and if anybody else notices anything, you can bring it up now, or like I say, I'll bring it up again when we get ready to set the July agenda and just make sure it's okay with everybody to go ahead and send that out. So that'll give you a little time to look at it. Anything else? And again, one more time, thank you, Dr. Shockley, for writing that letter. I think you summed it up well.
You're welcome, and it is a draft. Okay, so any other thing you see, let us know.
All right, sounds good. Anything else with the communications update?
Yes. Since this is our June meeting, there are terms that are ending. And unfortunately, some of the individuals whose terms are ending are not here. Specifically, Ms. Bacon could not join us today. She let us know that she had a conflict, but her term is ending. Ms. Bobbitt will actually be coming back to the board to replace her in July. So I just wanted to acknowledge her service, even though she's not here. And I will certainly reach out to her on behalf of the board in writing to thank her. But she's been an integral part of this board for several years now, and we will certainly miss her.
All right, and I certainly do echo that, as I know so many people on the board who worked with her do. Yep. All right, so thank you again for writing a letter on our behalf. All right, anything else on the communications update? All right, Chris.
Yeah, this is my last meeting too.
Oh, well, now
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I
so-
didn't see that coming.
Yeah,
How did
I've been
I
on
miss that?
a very long time. 3 terms plus COVID. I got an extra bonus year in there somehow. It's like 10 years total. It's been awesome. I've loved it. But I'm tagging out to a younger, very energetic colleague of mine, Dr. Jenny Bischoff. And I was just texting her to say, it's a little bittersweet. This is my last meeting, and I thought about coming in person because it was the last one, but thank goodness I didn't with the Interstate 70 situation. Good Lord. So yeah, I just wanted to say I've enjoyed it. It's been great and made a lot of lifelong friends and learned so much from all of you. So thank you so much for the ride. It's been awesome.
Absolutely, and you've made some pretty long journeys to get here from time to time, and she's always our, we always check on the weather out in your neck of the woods when you came on virtually, because most of the time you were here, and if you weren't here, it's like, well, there's some serious snow out in the mountains, so anyway, but thank you for all your contributions, and as you look back, I can think about, and I'm not going to list them because there's too many, but there are so many accomplishments that you can say you took part of, that this board managed to do, including almost that total rewrite that we went through and so forth. You were all part of that, for so long. So yeah, I'm very proud of the work that you've done, and I'm proud of the fact that I was able to help be there when we did that together. So
It was awesome. Like I said, a great ride. Thanks so much.
Yeah, we're gonna miss you. Being on this board is like a free education. I really do. I mean that, because you get to meet so many people from so many different perspectives and so forth, and you walk away with so much knowledge you didn't have before. And Chris, I've learned so much from you. So I appreciate that. And to that, I say that to Joy as well. So thank you both. All right. Is there anybody else we missed? If anybody's leaving, spring it on me now if I missed it. All right. All right. Well, thank you so much. Anything else on the communications update? All right. Well, then we are moving quickly ahead. I think we have next on the agenda COMAR 13A07-0603. That's incorporation by reference, and you have a cover memo for permission to adopt, so that'll give you the background. And Alexandra's making her way to the mic, so take us through that. It's wonderful to see you again.
It's good
And
to
you
see
always
you.
keep us
Thank you.
updated when these standards
I
change
know,
and there's
and
new organizations and
I know.
I don't know
it
how you
will
keep
change
track of all-
every year moving forward. So
Yeah.
we will do this over and over and over again.
I
so.
honestly, I was looking at it and I thought, I don't know how she keeps track of all of these different organizations
well, I
that
didn't keep
accredit.
a wonderful track in the beginning, which is why we had some corrections that had to be made because, the standards, we've got 40-some standards, they update very frequently, at least annually. Some of them get republished. So we're going to be doing this every year. And then, of course, as you all, as a board, identify new standards that you want us to look at and incorporate, we'll do this. So we will always have this conversation at least once a year, if not more. But as you will recall, this board initiated these, and we published them in the Maryland Register for 30 days beginning April 18th. We got 0 comments. Good and bad, right? Maybe they didn't read it, or maybe they just trusted us. Or they decided they weren't going to dig in and find any errors on our part. So we believe we're ready to go, and we are requesting that this board, as the initiating board, give us permission to adopt and move it to the State Board of Education for their next meeting late
right.
this month.
So do you want to walk us through some of the specifics on this?
So we had done them before. There's some language in here that you can see that was added, incorporation by reference in the very beginning to add national and state standards. What's highlighted here are mostly changes to dates, to update the dates that we have recognized. We did add the American Library under the specialist areas, the American Library Association, American Association of School Librarians, and the Council for Accreditation of Educator Preparation, CAPE School Librarian Preparation Standards were added into there under the specialist areas. And every other change was either an addition change or a date change to update it. And then, of course, you'll see some of the numbering changed as a result of adding a new standard. And that's essentially what we did. You all are pretty familiar with all of these. We've talked about them for a number of years, and most of the updates are not are not anything other than republishing for updating for the year.
All right. Are there any questions about any of the updates or changes that you see here? All right. Well, then I will entertain a motion to adopt COMAR 13A070603 incorporation by reference. And if you come off mic or wish to move, just say your name out loud as you do that. All right. So I entertain a motion to adopt.
This is Kim Moore. I second that motion.
Actually, I think you're initiating the motion. All right. So now I need a second.
Okay.
Keisha Allen, I second.
All right. So we have a second. Any further discussion? All in favor for permission to adopt COMAR 13A070603, let's signify by saying aye, or you can give a thumbs up if you're on camera.
Aye.
All right. Any opposed?
Aye.
Are there any abstentions? All right. It is adopted. Great work. Thank you so much. I'm sure a number of you probably teach classes where you have students that have to match up their lessons and their objectives to the SPA standards and the CAPE standards and all of those standards and stuff. So it's meaningful work. It really is, keeping up with all of that stuff. All right. So thank you again for all the work on that. All right. The next thing we have alternative licensure pathway recommendations. This is for discussion only. Are we ready for that? Okay. And you'll see that you also got a handout, and those of you that are attending virtually, you got this online as well. It was in the initial packet that Kelly sent out. I published mine. I don't know if you can see it, but I did 4 to a page, but we've got 2 here. But either way, that's what you're looking for. All right, and Ms. Fitzpatrick, welcome, and thank you so much for being here and putting together this presentation.
Good morning, everyone. Oh, I always forget that I'm short and I have to lean in close. Good morning, everyone. So happy to be here. Today's an exciting day where we get to present our recommendations from not only the Fine Arts Work Group, but the PSTEB subcommittee that explored alternative licensure pathways for career changers who have content expertise. So we are going to jump right on in. So the first part of our presentation will look at the recommendations from the Fine Arts Work Group. Then we'll also look at the Alternative Licensure Subcommittee recommendations. And then this morning, the department would like to present some considerations for the board in possibly making some amendments based on our research. And so at that time, we'll take some questions and open it up for discussion. So just a recap from the Fine Arts Work Group and those objectives. That work group met or started meeting in February 2025 and consisted of 16 members from across the state, from the department, institutions of higher education, and also nonprofit organizations and our arts advocacy groups. The objectives of that work group were to review the current licensure pathways for teachers in fine arts areas, and that includes visual arts, dance, music, and theater, which are K through 12 specialty areas. And then also make recommendations to the Professional Standards and Teacher Education Board, PSTEB, that is you all, for additional pathways for these educators. So jumping into the recommendations from that work group, the work group decided that reinstating a version of a transcript analysis pathway for fine arts licensure would best meet the needs for our current educators. Again, that would be limited to educators who are seeking licensure in visual arts, dance, music, and theater. It would be designed for conditionally licensed teachers who have expertise in the field of fine arts. So we had a lot of discussion about individuals who maybe work in the nonprofit space, have occupational experience, but would not necessarily fit into licensure in like the specialized areas of fine arts. So there isn't a direct pathway for those individuals. The following requirements would make up that transcript analysis pathway. So the first would be a demonstration of content knowledge, which again, we looked at the former transcript analysis pathway under COMAR 13A, 13A12 educator certification, and decided if we wanted, to take some of the requirements from there. So there were some adjustments, but obviously, content knowledge is important. The second requirement would be pedagogical coursework. And then the work group members decided that they wanted to ensure that there was rigor included and that there was a test of teaching ability. So we'll go over those options individually. So the first, the demonstration of content knowledge for the transcript analysis pathway or the proposed pathway. These candidates would need to demonstrate content knowledge that is aligned to the licensure area that they are seeking. And they may do so in the following ways. So the first would be a bachelor's degree or higher in the content area, so in art, in dance, in music, or theater. The second would be a bachelor's degree or higher in any field and also presenting at least 24 hours of related content coursework. And so this is very similar to the requirements in the former transcript analysis pathway. So that is option number 2. Number 3 would be a bachelor's degree or higher in any field with a passing score on a content licensure test. And the fourth would be a bachelor's degree or higher in any field with 3 years of content-related occupational experience, and this is to include post-secondary teaching experience. This is a new option, so we've never had occupational experience as a way to demonstrate content knowledge. So we'll come back to these for discussion at the end, but those are the 4 options that were recommended by the work group. So moving on to pedagogical coursework. So candidates with content expertise in fine arts must demonstrate professional knowledge. And so the work group is proposing that 18 semester hours of either college credit or MSDE approved continuing professional development or CPD credits in the following areas. So the first is instructional design and strategies for effective teaching. The second is differentiated instruction and supports for diverse learners. The third is human development and learning theory. The fourth is assessment for learning. And the fifth is classroom management and inclusive environments. So 5 courses, 18 credits. And that's the only way that those individuals would be able to demonstrate pedagogical coursework across those topic areas. The last requirement or category of requirements for this pathway would be a test of teaching ability. And so the great thing about this is we have some options now in our regulations that currently exist. And so the work group included all 3 of those options. The first is submitting a passing score on a performance assessment, and so that would be the EdTPA. The second would be earning an effective end-of-year evaluation from a Maryland school district, a state-operated school, or approved non-public school. And the third will be completion of a local education agency induction program that is approved by both MSDE and the AIB. At this time, we do not have any approved induction programs, but it is an option in the regulations. All of these options for demonstrating teaching ability would require that educator is employed and has access to students. And so this could be accomplished while they hold a conditional license while employed in a district, a state-operated school, or an approved non-public school. Am I moving too fast? Are we okay? Okay, yes, ma'am.
You are not, Ms. Fitzpatrick. You're moving perfectly. I do have a question before we go to the next presentation.
Yes, ma'am.
And you may have mentioned this in one of your other presentations, so pardon me if I have forgotten your answer. For the requirement, for the pedagogical coursework,
Yes, ma'am.
did the committee make suggestions about the determination of this coursework, given the move back to transcript analysis, and would it be up to the MSDE to determine what courses are identified as a strategy for effective teaching or learning theory? Just curious about that conversation, given that I've been in other conversations.
Yes, ma'am. I know where this is going. So
Okay.
the department has some suggestions or some considerations for the board, given the language of the recommendations and what is currently offered at our community colleges, also for our CPD courses currently, and then just in the IHE space in general. So we have some considerations, given that these aren't fully in alignment with what is out there right now and what's accessible to educators, so we will get there. I think that we had a lot of conversations in the Fine Arts Work Group about what the ideal would be, right? And looking at the former transcript analysis pathway. And so I do believe that the work group members are open to changes now that we have a better idea based on our research and what is currently accessible to our educators.
Thank you. And my other question is, was the charge of the work group specifically for conditionally licensed teachers? I know that you shared with us before that there's still not a direct pathway, for these other groups. And I couldn't remember the original charge. And I'm assuming yes, but I just thought I would, because I know I'm going to be asked as people reach out to us about.
Absolutely. So not necessarily. We were looking at an alternative pathway just in general.
Okay.
A lot of these candidates that are coming in have degrees in fine arts, like a BFA from MICA, or
Exactly.
they work in a space where they have another degree, but they have the content expertise in art.
Just not the pedagogy.
And so there wasn't necessarily, we explored a direct pathway to professional licensure. I think that the work group members really wanted to ensure that these individuals had the pedagogical coursework under their belt and obviously maintain some rigor and ensure that they could demonstrate their teaching ability as well.
Okay. It sounds to me that one way to address that would be to be a conditionally licensed teacher.
Yes, ma'am.
I got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions before we move on? Go ahead.
Yes, Ms. Stanton.
Just a question about the test of teaching ability options. I see the passing score on the Ed TPA. That feels equitable with other content areas. I'm curious about like earning an effective end of year evaluation and how that feels equitable, given that other content area teachers on conditional licenses wouldn't be able to only use an effective evaluation, if that makes any sense. Like when I was conditionally licensed, being evaluated as effective was not enough for me to get onto a professional pathway. So I'm just curious about that.
I guess I'm not understanding the question, yeah.
So since you've gone through that process, I went through it as well. So we have changed the pedagogical test requirements. So as a reminder to the whole board, starting July 1st, 3 weeks away, all Maryland candidates have to take the performance assessment, which is the EdTPA, or they do have the induction option, even though there are no approved induction programs for this purpose at the moment. This is all statutory requirements. And then the new one that just passed in 2025 through House Bill 888 is if you're nationally accredited Maryland institution, you can develop your own portfolio performance assessment for this process. So that's brand new. Where you're seeing the effective end of year evaluation as a test of teaching ability is what we currently have in the regulations as an option to meet the pedagogical requirements for out-of-state program completers and license holders, because the statute also says that they have to take a test of teaching ability when they come into Maryland, whether they have no experience or whether they have 30 years of experience. They have to take that test. So this board, which I think Leslie, it was before you joined the board, this board carved out a way to do that on the job. And so we will consider that year-end effective evaluation as the test of teaching ability. So that is where that recommendation is coming from.
Thank you. Thank you, Kelly, for just clarifying. And so, yes, there have been changes and there have been amendments in the regulations to make that option for our out-of-state folks. Yes, Miss. Yes, Nikki. Dr. Woodward.
Just to add to that,
Yes.
I am hearing Ms. Stanton's concern. I understand if someone has been an educator in another state space and have been effective and they're coming over. Aren't these folks, they've never been certified or licensed in any space at all, and so we're utilizing that marker for them the same we would for someone else who had done the work to be able to be certified or licensed based on their state somewhere else. Like I'm having a little bit of, I'm having a hard time reconciling the comparison between someone who's never done and completed the process and a group that has, even if it's outside of our state. So can you just give us some how we came to that?
That's a very good question. I understand the concern. I would say that within this audience, we are looking at a lot of people who have at least some experience, occupational experience, and many of these folks are coming from the nonprofit space and our nonprofits and arts advocacy groups within the state. And so they are working in schools right now, teaching students in programs. That is not everyone, obviously, right? There will be individuals who come in with no experience, but that is a portion of the audience. So they will have some experience there, but that's why we will require those candidates to go through the pedagogical courses. So, different audience, but I do understand the concern in that these individuals aren't coming in from another state where they've done a program and they have experience in that state.
And as a result, I just feel like I have to say one more thing aloud. I also have pause in that we have 25 very unique evaluation processes across the state. All of our LEAs and our seed school use very different. So how Ms. Stanton is evaluated and the determination of effective is achieved, how I achieve evaluation are very different across the LEAs. And so I think that I respect the fact that folks are in schools and engaging with students, but the fact, and we just do not have any uniformity in our evaluations across the state. And so that, again, elevates my pause.
Absolutely, and that's heard, that's valid. I do want to go back to Kelly's point that these the options for test of teaching ability are now in statute as well for initial licensure. Not that one, I'm sorry. So I'm going to note that because that is, I hear you.
Kelly.
I agree. I agree that we are talking about a different type of candidate, and so I just want to make sure that the board understands that the purpose of today's presentation is to talk this out.
Yeah.
And just because a recommendation has been made does not mean this board has to accept it. We can modify it. We can say absolutely not. We can say we love it, but that is absolutely all on the table. And so that's really our goal today, is to get a sense of how the board would like us to proceed with the regulatory language.
Perhaps some additional language then that would include like out-of-state license holders in the fine arts so that it just kind of is aligned to our other regulations.
So we already have a pathway for them.
Yeah.
So I think the question, and again, I'm gonna ask that once we go through the next set of recommendations and get to the considerations, this should absolutely sounds like be a consideration that we talk through, and I don't think it's one that we included on our slide, so I'll make a note of it so we come back to it. But just as a reminder, for all of the recommendations today, we are talking specifically about individuals who do not have any preparation in teaching, that are living in Maryland and who would like to change their career. So whether that's the federal employee, the former federal employee, whether that is an artist or an individual who has spent occupational experience in the content area, these are the individuals that we're talking about.
Karen?
So I'm just trying to kind of wrap my head around this, and what keeps popping in is our teachers at our Career Tech Center who were electricians or plumbers or have those automotive, have those technical experience, and then have come to teaching through that. Am I on the right track with that? Okay, thank you.
That's a great point. And just as a reminder, we do not require professional and technical education teachers to take any assessments.
Right. And I mean, previously this board worked on creating a pathway for them because it was so hard to get them, and they were having trouble with praxis and things like that and so forth. And there were teachers who were highly effective in the classroom based on the feedback of their administrators and so forth, and yet we were losing them. So my understanding is what we did with that to fix it has been pretty effective. At least that's the feedback generally that we got as a board several years ago. So this I noticed that too, especially when on the previous slide it said occupational experience.
Yes.
That was kind of what made that light bulb go off. Although I wondered could you give us a couple of examples of what occupational experience is?
For example, those
Yeah.
individuals who teach in the nonprofit space, we will be looking at that. Individuals who work, for example, visual arts gallery work as an artist. Individuals, I'm thinking about also the related degrees. So for example, at Peabody Institute, you can get a degree in production, in music production, but that doesn't result, you would have to be like dually enrolled in the education program to then go on to teach. So individuals that have related degrees or teach within the space or work within the space in the fine arts. And so that is from our IHEs, that's where we received a lot of feedback. They have their students who are graduating undergrad with these degrees and are working as artists in those 4 areas, but then they do not have a pathway other than going back and getting a second degree and paying for a master's, et cetera. So those would be the individuals that we would be looking at. And we did actually, you brought up a great point, Ms. Yoho, look at occupational experience, sorry. So the CTE or PTE areas, we looked at that particular route for occupational experience in thinking about the recommendations for today.
Ken, then I had a question as well, and thank you for that. Those were great examples. That helps. Going back to the slide on test of teaching ability and the discussion we just had about that. Kelly, I don't mean to jump far ahead on this, but as this gets turned into COMAR, in my mind, in some COMAR, we use the word effective, and then in some COMAR, it seems like we use the word successful. Do those mean the same? Do we have to think about that as the COMAR gets written?
So we transitioned to effective
Okay.
for licensure because that is what aligns with our induction or our evaluation regulations.
Okay, so successful generally is now gone to effective. Okay, well then that solves that problem. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. All right, anybody else? All right. You can continue. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you. So our next part of the presentation will be around the Alternative Licensure Subcommittee. And so that work group or subcommittee we met on 4 occasions, and it was comprised of individuals of this board. So I want to first stop and thank all of you for your hard work in that group. It was wonderful. So Ms. Stanton was on it, Dr. Shockley was on it, Dr. Taylor as well, and I know I'm missing a few other people, but we really appreciate your work, and we were able to get so much done in 4 sessions. And so during that time, we conducted a national review of licensure requirements, focusing on looking at other states and pathways where they leverage work experience and then also content expertise. And surprisingly, there are many states that do so. We tried to do the same for fine arts, but unfortunately there aren't many examples for fine arts educators. But in terms of work experience and content experience for our secondary licensure areas, they exist. So we were able to look at those. That subcommittee was charged with identifying alternate licensure pathways for degree holding career changers. So, for example, our federal workers, including those who have content expertise or related occupational experience, and that would include like teaching experience as well at the higher education level. The subcommittee today is recommending two distinct alternative pathways to licensure. One is a transcript analysis pathway, and one is for our for career changers who have higher education teaching experience and an advanced degree. So the first, and this is a little bit of a mouthful, but the secondary general education content expert pathway. So this is a transcript analysis pathway. It is intended for our career changers who have demonstrated content knowledge through a degree and or experience in the content field. So we will go through what those options look like. It would be limited to secondary general education licensure areas, so grades 7 through 12 only. And the requirements, similar to the fine arts work group's pathway recommendation, would be demonstration of content knowledge, pedagogical coursework, and then a test of teaching ability. So the first requirement for demonstrating content knowledge, these candidates would demonstrate content knowledge that is directly aligned to the content area where they are seeking licensure. And they may do so in one of the following ways. The first is a master's degree or higher in the content area. The second would be a bachelor's degree in the content area with one of the following: either a passing score on the content licensure assessment or 2 years of satisfactory occupational experience in the field of the licensure area. And the last is a bachelor's degree or higher in any field, so any area, a passing score on the content licensure assessment, and 3 consecutive years of occupational experience in the field of the licensure area. So there's a little bit of a difference between 2 and 3. 2, the candidate must have a degree, a bachelor's degree in the content area with either the test or the 2 years of occupational experience, while the third option is a bachelor's degree in any area with the content assessment and 3 consecutive years of occupational experience in that area.
I probably shouldn't need to ask a question about a committee I was on, but did we define what satisfactory experience means? Just asking because we just talked about successful versus effective evaluation, so kind of.
I'm sorry. So currently, to verify occupational experience, we have a form that we utilize in licensure. So that would be for our individuals that are coming in with like out-of-state experience, or even in the occupational experience for PTE or SASFA. And so that individual has the employer fill it out, and there's an area where they can show that it's satisfactory or not.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to the second requirement, which is the professional coursework. So candidates with content expertise in these secondary general education content areas have to complete the 18 semester hours or MSDE approved CPD credits in the following areas. So there's a little bit of a difference here. 18 hours, it must be 3 semester hours or CPD credits in each area. The first is methods of teaching. The second is assessment of learning. The third is introduction to special education. The fourth, human growth and development. Fifth, teaching literacy in the content area. And the last and final one, there are some options here, so any one of these would be sufficient. Culturally responsive pedagogy, multicultural education, or introduction to teaching multilingual learners. So I want to provide some context here, and of course, my subcommittee members can jump in. We spent a lot of time looking at what's available right now in the state in terms of courses, how they are titled, and what is included in those courses. And we also utilized the professional coursework that was required in the former transcript analysis pathway to see, what should be kept, what could we add to, and so that last option for culturally responsive pedagogy, multicultural education, introduction to teaching multilingual learners, those are reflective of the courses that are offered right now in the state. The last and final requirement for this pathway would be, again, a test of teaching ability. And so the subcommittee is proposing that the candidates demonstrate teaching ability with the three options that are also reflected in the fine arts work group's recommendation. So the first is a passing score on the EdTPA, so portfolio assessment. The second is the effective year-end evaluation from a local education agency, state-operated school, or approved non-public school. And the third will be completion of an LEA induction program that is approved by the department and the AIB. All of these options, again, require employment and access to students, and so they would be accomplished while that individual is employed and holds a conditional license. The second pathway that the subcommittee is recommending is the experienced higher education faculty pathway. And so this pathway is intended for our faculty who work in higher education institutions, and they have teaching experience in a content area that is aligned to an area of licensure in Maryland. So again, there are three requirements: demonstration of content, teaching experience instead of pedagogy, because these individuals are coming in with teaching experience, and then the test of teaching ability. So under the content requirement, these individuals will have a master's degree or higher, so an advanced degree in the licensure area. For that teaching experience requirement, we are recommending 2 years of full-time effective teaching experience at an accredited college or university in the licensure area being sought. And lastly, the test of teaching ability, similar to the other two pathways, would be the three options. So EdTPA, portfolio assessment, an effective year-end evaluation, and lastly, completion of an LEA induction program that is approved by the department and AIB. So I will stop there if we have general questions before we go on to the department's considerations for the board. Or we can continue. I think the considerations will probably spark up a bit of discussion if we wanted to just jump into them, but I'm open to taking questions right now as well.
Any questions?
No? Oh, yes, Dr. Allen.
I just want to make sure that I'm understanding, and actually probably for all of the pathways, for the demonstration of, what is that last thing? The test of teaching ability. Mm-hmm. So for experienced higher education faculty pathway, so to be able to demonstrate their teaching, we're talking about people who are maybe conditional teachers at this point. So that demonstration would be on the PK through 12 level, right? So we're not talking about teaching ability of higher education students, just making sure. So these are people who are no longer necessarily in higher ed.
Again,
okay.
So the test of teaching ability, just like the other two pathways, would have to be done while employed if those individuals,
yes,
because they need access to students.
Right. Yep. Okay.
Absolutely.
Just making sure.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Okay, and I don't see anybody online. Anybody online with questions? I want to just make sure I'm not missing anybody. I'm trying to keep an eye out. Okay. I did have just kind of a timeline question. So
Sure.
since several of the options are talking about teacher induction programs that are approved, Kelly, do you know, is there kind of a timeline as to when we think that'll be in place? I realize we just finished, I mean, we're early because we just finished the standards for that and so forth, and that came to us.
So, yeah, so we're going back to the State Board of Education this month at the end of June. We did receive a handful of public comments as expected. Like the licensure regulations, this is a big repeal amendment situation. So we absolutely anticipate that there could be substantive changes that the state board decides to make, which would start the process over. Because the state board adopts those alone, though, at least it doesn't have to go to both boards. So I would say that, you know, best case scenario, not best, I don't want to use the word best. Quickest scenario is that the State Board of Education does not recommend any substantive changes and it's adopted in June. So that would be the fastest that it could happen. Now, mind you, though, they're written not to become effective until July 1st, 2027. The other option would be that the state board makes substantive changes and they go back out for public comment, which will take probably a month or two to hit the register, 30 days in the register, and then come back. So we're looking at maybe like 4 months to come back to the state board for final adoption. So anywhere between this month and maybe 4 or 5 months out.
Okay. And that does not come back to this board, you said? Okay. Thank you. All right. Any other questions before we continue with the presentation? All right. Whenever you're ready.
Okay.
So we want to take some time and just present some of the considerations for the board for the requirements of these pathways. And so the first recommendation that we would like to review regarding demonstration of content knowledge. So the Fine Arts Work Group, as well as the PSTEB subcommittee, recommended some different requirements for demonstrating content knowledge. First, the Fine Arts Work Group is allowing someone, or is proposing that the regulation proposed pathway would allow someone with a bachelor's degree in an unrelated area, so in any field, to take the content test or present 3 years of occupational experience. While the subcommittee is recommending that someone with a bachelor's degree in an unrelated area take the content test and present 3 years of occupational experience. So there is some difference there, or an and. The consideration that we would like to bring forth to the board is potentially standardizing that requirement across both of those transcript analysis pathways. So we have two options. The first would be aligning to the Fine Arts Work Group's recommendation with someone who holds a bachelor's degree in an unrelated field to take the content test or present 3 years of occupational experience. And the other option would be aligning to the subcommittee's recommendation and require someone with a bachelor's degree in an unrelated area to present both the content test and the 3 years of occupational experience. So I will pause there and open it up for discussion.
Good morning again.
Good morning.
Okay. So I was a member of the work group, and just in thinking about the work that you presented, Ms. Fitzgerald, from the other work group, I can understand why each group came to different conclusions. And I can understand why the MSTE would want us to choose one. However, let me just give some nuance to the and. We spent a lot of time talking about a person coming into secondary education, and because we put some boundaries around that. And our concern was, you know, someone passing general concerns that people have. Like when someone takes a test and they do well one time, we aren't sure that that is enough to guarantee the knowledge that they will need in a secondary content area. I'm happy to articulate my bias as a secondary biology ESOL special education teacher. But I would be concerned about, just someone taking the test one time. Happy, right, for them to pass it. But as a career changer, that work experience in, a lab or coming from some other community, I'm speaking specifically about biology here, is what I think one reason that I advocated. I wasn't the only one. We had a pretty full committee, but I just wanted to add that context for our colleagues here as to the and. With that stated, there are components in the fine arts that I also understand for the or, and also fine arts is a PK-12 area, and so I could understand that for many reasons. But I just wanted to add, and I'm happy to add some examples of why the or, in addition to sort of the passing the one test one time, would not be sufficient in my mind for a secondary educator or an elementary educator. I'm just talking about secondary because that is the grade level that we came up with. So thank you for listening.
Having been a part of this subcommittee as well, I'm definitely going to advocate right behind Dr. Shockley. And I do want to just add a point of clarity for me. I heard Ms. Yoho around the technical, our CTE, but give me for clarification. Don't our CTE professionals who transition to teaching positions, aren't they coming in with license from their perspective content professionalism, which is very different, in my humble opinion, than an artist who is coming in? So I just want to give that clarity of like, I agree, but when CT comes in, you are certified in your field as an engineer, as a cosmetologist, as nursing. Like they have to have license. It's not my expertise, so I don't know, in their specific field to transition to the teaching position. Correct? Not just working in that field.
It depends.
It depends.
Oh.
Yep.
So
there are some?
not all PTE areas are licensed areas in their occupations. So there are some areas, and the ones you mentioned are very good examples. So for cosmetology, for barbering, for nursing, yes, that is a requirement because they are required to hold that license to be in that occupation. Most occupations associated with the PTE licensure are not required to hold licensure to be in that occupation. So they have an option of coming in with a certain number of years of occupational experience, and depending on if they have a degree in that area, which is rare usually, they can knock off a year of occupational experience if they have a degree. They can knock off a year of occupational experience if they do have a voluntary license, like a national credential associated with that particular occupation, but it depends.
So would that be like mechanics and construction?
Yes, ma'am.
Would
Absolutely.
be the one specific. I worked in the CTE school for a couple of years, so.
Yeah, that's a good example.
Okay.
That's a good example.
Perfect. Yeah.
Just a follow-up question to that. So is there a formal licensure pathway for those individuals for the PTE? Is it PTE, CTE? CTE.
Yes, so we actually have a chapter dedicated to that particular type of teacher, and there are three or four pathways, and we're really talking about the occupational experience pathway because I would say anecdotally 99% of them come in that way. We don't have any approved programs in Maryland that lead to CTE teacher certification. It's rare to see them ever. And it's quite honestly rare to have a candidate come in with a bachelor's degree in that particular CTE content.
And those individuals have to complete 12 hours of professional coursework. So I just want to throw that out there. It is 12 hours for occupational experience.
and I know we're not there yet, but I'm still stuck on the trying to make sure that we're comparing apples to apples when it comes to the test of teaching ability and earning an effective end of year evaluation. And so if there aren't any approved Maryland programs for CTE, yes, am I understanding that correctly? But there are for arts and for the fine arts. And so I don't know, again, that would be comparing apples to apples. Am I understanding that correctly? I'm just really, I think, Leslie, I think it was you who brought it up, like being concerned about there being an alternative, with the alternative pathway, folks not being held to the same standards as someone who's going through a traditional pathway. And so if the effective teaching wouldn't stand for, for someone else, that maybe it shouldn't be used here.
So I will share that we do not have a tremendous amount of fine arts programs, and there are 0 alternative fine arts programs approved to operate in the state. So just so you know. I think this is a great discussion. I don't know if we can necessarily compare apples to apples or apples to oranges. I think absolutely we should consider like what the accessibility is for these pathways, for sure. But at the end of the day, and please members jump in if I'm misconstruing, but we really focused on what we thought was the minimum amount of preparation that these individuals needed for licensure, regardless of the area or of the accessibility of the programs. So we didn't really come at it from that lens, but I think it's definitely worth considering.
Dr. Jacqueline? You have that look like you're ready.
Right. So I'm like, I'm not moving on
and
yet.
maybe needs the motivation to come off mic.
I was just trying to think about this. I believe that there were conversations, a lot of conversations about the differences and where, not from the lens that you just offered, Dr. Allen, but in general, just thinking about the audience and the need, and also keeping the rigor in many of the areas. So making sure to also not exceed what would be required. And so I think we tried to land in what I think is a balanced sort of way, just in looking at the audience and the data that we had, and also just our lived experiences and the potential and the changes that this could make, but also not, even though we looked at, as Kelly mentioned, making sure that we were able to meet everyone at a particular place, we also were really, as you can see, the and, right, on the other area, not so flexible, but certainly rigorous in the pathway as well. So it is a challenge to strike a balance, right? Because you want to cast a wide net to meet the needs of the state, but then also make sure that our learners are getting what they deserve in terms of effectiveness. So that is a tension for sure. So hopefully, based on what others think, we can get to a place where we think we've struck the balance. Yeah. That was helpful.
And to provide some context, just in the difference working on the fine arts work group, there are some, with many of the praxis content tests, for the fine arts areas, there are some concerns with that content test. In addition, I want to add that dance does not have a content assessment. So that would be an area where the option would be the degree and experience, if that individual holds an unrelated degree. Yep. So I just wanted to throw that out there, but I understand the concerns with the or versus the and.
Ms. Fitzgerald, is that one of the reasons for the or, potentially?
One of the reasons, yes.
Okay.
There, again, lots of concerns around the content assessment in general with Praxis. For fine arts areas, I would say that the licensure office, we get the most feedback about the content tests in the fine arts areas. So I will just bring that to the group.
Feedback.
Can I jump in here?
Oh.
Sorry. Can I
Oh, go
Sorry.
ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. That was going to be my concern, was just, we know that for many of these tests, unfortunately, we're not seeing a correlation between performance on the content test and effectiveness in the classroom, right? Like that's kind of why I thought option one existed, is because, in my opinion, in my humble opinion, I value occupational experience more than passing a test one day, especially when we don't always see that correlation between performance on tests and performance in the classroom. So that was my understanding of why option one is on the table, and something that I think we should think about again when the purpose of this is really to meet a need for the state. And I will just say, I wonder if there is a way to sort of test to see the number of participants, if we were to move forward with option two, the number of participants that don't pass the test, have the occupational experience, don't pass the test, and just like, the number that we may be limiting from the classroom in this great need area.
I don't think we could pull occupational experience. I don't think we have that. But we can get the data for ETS. And we have explored that more specifically around the arts, for the test for visual arts. There was a work group last summer that I was a part of. And so Lizzie Devereaux, who presented with me last meeting, and her colleagues, looked at that test and made some recommendations. So that is data that we have in terms of pass rate. But that was one of the considerations. And so that's why I wanted to bring that up and just kind of give some context to the thinking in the fine arts work group. So I appreciate that.
Dr. Bolson.
So I was just looking to offer, I know a lot of the, it seems like a lot of the discussion when we've gotten to this place has been in favor of the and so I kind of want to just lodge a commitment to the or on my side. I know the conversation's gone both ways. A couple considerations there. One, there's only one part of the overall licensure. So this is just the content knowledge piece. And if we have ands in multiple places down the road, because when we look at this as a whole, getting to a point where, that licensure gets really difficult. And so I guess I would want to put in perspective what's happening on the school system side when we're looking at one of these candidates. More often than not, our schools with the highest turnover are the ones looking at the most conditional teachers, are the ones looking at, trying to find more creative ways to get people into the classrooms. The alternative, when they have, a strong conditional teacher that they're not able to get through. When we talked about the CTE folks, we talked about the struggle with some of these content tests and that sort of thing. The alternative in those schools is then when we don't find someone, they end up with a long-term substitute who is not certified in anything and really unable to move kids forward. So I worry about the situation where if we have someone who's strong, and sometimes, many times we're able to account for that strength based on the program they've gone through and the licensure. But in many cases, it's coming down to the discretion of the administrators, who we all have the same shared interest. I mean, the administrators in those buildings want the best teachers. They want the teachers who can both manage the classroom and advance the content. And, so they're doing their work on the other end. And I think this provides, the or obviously provides more flexibility for that school-based administrator to use their judgment and say, no, this really is a teacher worth investing in, even though, some of these other steps might not be in place. So I firmly support the premise of or here, knowing that I think we have similar questions coming up when we get into the other parts of the licensure. So I just wanted to put that on the table.
Go ahead, Nikki.
I just want to bring up two things, and I'm open to all the conversation. I think there's a very distinct difference in that the arts, they cover K through 12. And in any given year, all of us know you could be teaching high school one year, and then there's shifts, and you have to then have the capacity to teach fifth grade art in any of the areas. And so I just want to, as we go forward, I think Dr. Bolson said it correctly, like we need to think about like how are we ensuring they're going to have the capacity to transition, whereas with the alt path, it's only secondary, right? And so they need to have stronger or a very strong content area knowledge in order to meet the demands of the courses that our students will be taking. So I do think there's some distinction there, and I'm not opposed to that, but I do just think it really is important to think about the fact with art, when it comes to the content, and I totally understand the concerns around the biases of, or perceived biases around a lot of these assessments that our educators are taking, is that they have to be prepared. As a K-12 teacher, you have to be prepared to be wherever you need or expected to be, and sometimes even in the same year.
I had a question, Kelly. This is more directed, I think, to you. And forgive me for not knowing this, but on the content test, is it a pass-fail, or is there a cut score that's established?
It's a cut score.
There's a cut score. So I guess I'm wondering a little bit, and I don't know this, so I'm not insinuating anything, but if we are having problems with people passing the test, even though they're probably qualified, because I think that's what we're sort of saying, is the cut score set a little too high, do we think? Has anybody looked at it, like in relation to other states where the cut score? Because I know Maryland often sets ours pretty high in comparison to other states.
We, as a rule of thumb, and I can only think, actually I can't think of any exception at this point. We used to have a couple exceptions that are no longer on the table. We adopt the recommendation of the multi-state standard setting panel. And there is a rigorous process that goes into setting the scores for tests. We would, in the past, there have been 2 times when we have raised the passing score within one standard error of measurement above, because we had like a 99% pass rate for a couple of assessments that have since been regenerated. So in my tenure in the last decade, we have never recommended a lower score for a content assessment. It is always something to consider, and we would never go beyond probably one SEM if we were ever going to make that recommendation. It's one thing to consider, and then the other piece to consider is whether or not the assessment itself has the appropriate content for Maryland. And there have been times that we've gone to ETS and said, this isn't working for Maryland, you need to redo it based on certain topic areas, and they've done that for us. So there are several options on the table when it comes to assessment.
Right, and it's not this board's purview to set scores.
That's
correct. Only a state board thing.
It is the state superintendent's purview to set scores. It is the State Board of Education's purview to adopt assessments.
Okay, and can you speak to, and it's okay if you can't, but I'm wondering, how appropriate do you believe the assessment aligns to Maryland standards and where its current recommended cut score is? Are we comfortable with it?
Are we talking about fine arts here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just the test we're talking about, since that seems to be the sticky wicket we're worried about.
So I rely on the experts, and the experts did come together during a work group, as Ms. Fitzpatrick shared last summer, and correct me if I'm wrong, did not finalize a recommendation. We're not comfortable finalizing a recommendation to say you should adopt another test, because there is another assessment that is on the market, and that assessment, the difference is it doesn't have the
I believe it does not have the written portion on it.
It's just multiple choice.
And our
Same content.
our surrounding states utilize that version of the test. But again, as Kelly said, they were our experts in with Lizzie Devereaux. They were not comfortable making a recommendation as of yet.
At that point, to change it.
Not comfortable making a recommendation as to one test versus another, you mean?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Was there a comfort level on the efficacy of the test? In other words, do you believe the test is
I
a valid
speak to
measurement?
that. Yeah,
as
I
a
cannot
committee,
speak to that.
was there a believe. Did both committees address whether the test is a valid measurement that they're comfortable with?
I think that's a question for Lizzie.
And we
I
can
do not
certainly
know.
take it back.
Yeah, we can take it back to
Right. I'm
Lizzie.
just because
Yeah.
there's concern a lot as to one or two based on how much do we want to put into this test. So therefore, looking at the test seems to be an appropriate question
Yeah.
to dig
Absolutely.
into.
So I think that part of our job at the agency is to always look at all of the tests to make sure that they're in alignment with our current curriculum and standards. I want to remind this board that the law requires a content assessment for licensure for all of our Maryland preparation program candidates. So one of the reasons why you're not going to see a recommendation that doesn't include a content assessment as an option is because this state, as a state, has put faith behind that particular measure as an option for content. But again, we're trying to give multiple measures here.
Right,
So
because there's
again,
an
going back
or.
to the and or option.
Right. Oh, go ahead.
I just wanted to, if I can just extend what Kelly was saying, also, that was a piece of that rigor that I mentioned earlier. I also want to add to the discussion some conversation that we haven't talked about in terms of the and. So when we looked at their literature that Ms. Fitzpatrick expressed to us earlier and as bulleted in the slides, we noticed that there are some states that I believe require like the years of experience to be concurrent. We took that out for the flexibility. And I believe there were states that, or maybe there weren't states, there was a conversation about, sort of this timeliness of experience. So we did not say it had to be in the last 3 years. We didn't say it had to be in the last 5 years. We just said that you had to have it. And so I do want everybody to understand those other components that didn't land for the purpose of flexibility. And so even though we didn't come to the conclusion of or, those are just some parts that I think we may want to think about that did not make it here for the and that are also flexible.
I'd like to throw out another option. So looking at this demonstration, and by the way, just because there's two options on the slide, sky's the limit. So please know that. That's why we're here. But just looking at the content knowledge recommendations from the subcommittee, one of the things that we didn't call out is the subcommittee recommended a master's degree or higher in the content area as like a standalone, okay, this is a content measure. Whereas the fine arts work group is considering the bachelor's degree as alone as that measure. So I think it's worth having a conversation about why are we requiring the master's degree? Is it worth considering kind of changing the framework here to say a bachelor's degree in the content area can be the content measure. Now we're going to talk about an unrelated bachelor's degree, talking about, the or and the and. So I think while we're having this conversation, we need to acknowledge the fact that one of these groups has required a master's and one has required a bachelor's degree. And maybe that's okay, but I think that we should talk about it.
That's helpful. If I may add, just in order of the work, I don't remember if the master's degree was decided on the same day as the other, so it might have just been like, rigor and rigor. And I could go on record to say that I could be swayed to for that to read bachelor's. Dr. Bolton.
My only thought on that is where this might overlap with the career ladder so the blueprint is pushing national board certification, and I think in many cases ACES over the master's degree. So I just don't know if there's a conflict there we need to be aware of, because we have a lot of people deciding which direction to go with their next steps in education, and there's an incentive to do the national board. So this might put this group in a different spot.
Nikki?
I just want to be clear. The consideration we're talking about right now about these two options, both of these are about a bachelor's that are not in your related content area, and that the pretense is that you've gained your knowledge based on your work experience, not your degree, right? Because it's unrelated, right? So I did not receive my bachelor's in art. I got my bachelor's in business administration. However, I have always enjoyed art, and I went and became an artist. And so now we're saying that because I was an visual artist for 3 years, I now have the breadth of knowledge in the content area to obtain licensure. Is that accurate? Okay.
Yes, and I also want to point out, so the work group for the fine arts, like, look at the screen right now.
Yeah,
So
I went back
so
to
the
the screen.
subcommittee, let's just look at two. Bachelor's degree in the content area plus one of the following, whereas their recommendation is bachelor's degree in any area and one of the following, which is why I'm kind of like temporarily trying to take the master's degree out of it and compare those two things. So your point is very well taken. I professionally am of the opinion that if they do not have a bachelor's degree in the content area, there should be multiple measures demonstrating content. That's where I will weigh in.
Same.
Anyone else?
Sorry, it's just like so hard on.
No, go right ahead.
Yeah, the only other thing I would say to that again is I hear that, and I just don't, if we have questions about whether the test is a good measure, like that's where I am. Like, I don't want to create an artificial barrier to entry or an artificial standard if it's not again correlated with what we're looking to see. I think that's my only question, is about again, in an area where we are understaffed and looking to bring in more folks. So my question is just about how good we feel about the content test as a measure.
Right. Noted. The other option to consider is expanding the amount of occupational experience required in lieu of both a test and occupational experience. So again, sky's the limit here. So if, spending 3 years as a visual artist doesn't make us feel comfortable that that individual has the breadth that they need to step into the classroom and teach K-12, would 5 years. So it then becomes a question of, can there be an occupational experience only component? Because it sounds like there are some of us that may not be comfortable with the 3-year mark.
I don't want to complicate this, but I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. That's fine.
Okay, so one reason, or one of the nuances that we talked about, unrelated, is in secondary, given all of the disciplines. Think about like social studies. I'm looking over there, social studies, right, and all the disciplines as well. And I thought I saw Sandy on here as well. Like, just there's some specificity here that we want to document as what's related and unrelated. But I also want to say that one thing that the test, without the test information, is going to be harder. I'm just trying to capture everybody's thinking, that Darren mentioned. But I raised my hand to say that the conversation around occupational experience for content knowledge for somebody who does not have a bachelor's degree in an area, if they have 3 years versus 4 years, I'm not sure that still says it's enough, because it's still in the other area, right? So for example, even if, I'm going to use my own life, so even if you were in chemistry, right, for 4 years, I don't know that gives you enough knowledge, because that's related. You still should at least have some knowledge of biology if you want. I'm just using that as an example. I didn't want to take us down this rabbit hole, but I just wanted us to give us because we're talking about secondary, I wanted to add the nuance that is secondary, that is different from the fine arts conversation. And with that in mind, the other reason that I raised my hand is because I hope that I think that we may land in a place where we don't standardize it, and I hope that's okay, because we are talking about something that is a PK-12 licensure area and something that's secondary. So wherever we land, I hope that, as Kelly reminded us, the sky is the limit, and please add your comments and thoughts about what it is. I don't believe that we are going to land where they're both standardized, because they're so different. Maybe we will, and we appreciate the considerations, but I that's not what I'm seeing so far.
Okay, so now I have 2 points. Just to acknowledge Dr. Shockley's point, I'm a social studies teacher, but I took the history practice. I would never intend to teach anything but American history. That is like my passion, my bread and butter, but I still had to be able to pass a test that asked me about European history, Chinese history, right? Like, because that makes you a more well-rounded teacher in the content area. And so I think that's a good point, that, right, like, you might get asked to teach biology as a chemist or whatever. So just to acknowledge that, I think it's important that we're aware that those content tests are really looking for a well-rounded expert in the field. Acknowledging that we also are questioning the validity of those tests. And then to Kelly's point, I'm also thinking about those like technical areas that do require certification or a license. So for example, a cosmetologist, nurse, could that license substitute in for the content test, or could that license plus 3 years of occupational experience? I know we have all been hoping to make this as complicated as possible, so I just wanted to add that alternative.
Can you give us an example of a license that you're referring to, like in the general secondary fields or the art fields?
So I mean, we talked about like if someone has a license as a cosmetologist, they have earned that license through whatever requirements that, whatever the state's requirements are for that license to be valid. So I think that's just something to acknowledge, that perhaps that becomes sufficient for like expertise in the field, and a content test might not then be as necessary.
And that's actually what we've done.
That is how it is.
So for the CTE areas, the professional technical PTE areas, they can utilize a license, and that is a way to demonstrate readiness to enter the P12 classroom. Yeah. So they should be okay. That group, I think we have not heard any complaints since we passed that chapter. So that's good news. I think they are in a good place. Now for these folks, I can't think of a license, like a comparable license for individuals working in the field, but I don't know what I don't know. So, yeah.
Karen?
If I can point out, because I was the model for a friend that got a cosmetology degree, she had to take a live person. There are state boards that they have to do a practical and a written part. My husband's an electrician. He had to take a state board, and he has to maintain that licensure through CEU. So there's an actual demonstration of your knowledge, both written and practical often. That's why I'm going back to, I'm an artist. I, paint thing, like who says, and what's the criteria, and so that's where I'm now also having the difficulty.
And just to go back to your point about professional licenses, that is one of the reasons why the Fine Arts Group opted for occupational experience for a degree that is not in one of those 4 areas, because, like, for example, again, you can get a degree in music production, you can have a degree in film or stage design, but those areas overlap with teaching music or teaching theater, and so there would have to be a demonstration of further content for that licensure area. So that was one of the reasons why we went with the or.
I'm not sure. Anyone else?
I'm just having a thought, sorry. So another option could potentially be, and I'm just talking about the fine arts at this point. Sophia just made a great point. So having a degree that's related to the area, not necessarily in the area, but also not philosophy, could potentially be its own kind of avenue. So like, I'm going to stick with what you just said. So like, let's say, you've got a film design degree rather than a theater degree, which like theater we would consider the content for theater licensure. But you come in with a film design degree, which is related to theater, then maybe we would only expect occupational experience. Whereas if you come in with a philosophy degree, but you have been working in the theater field, we would expect the assessment and the occupational experience, or just the assessment, or we could throw in another layer there and carve out the related degree candidate.
All right, so I'm thinking sort of historically when the board's been in this kind of predicament, where you've got a couple of options and they seem a little black and white, and we don't quite agree on either of them fully, like we see problems with both. And by the way I'm thinking here, if I'm summing this up correctly, is the two major concerns I hear is that what if you have a pretty good candidate who may have occupational experience or they've got a degree, but they can't quite pass that test. And we don't want that test to be a barrier, and we see other times where it has been. So that's the concern over that part. You've got all the stuff, but there's that test and you just can't do it. The other concern I think that came up more was you're not in any particular related area, but you passed the test, and maybe that's not quite enough. Because we're very concerned that someone with a completely unrelated degree who passes a test without anything else, well, that doesn't seem right either. So those, I think, are the two concerns that we see in these two options. So usually when the board is in sort of a predicament like that, Kelly kind of comes to our rescue, as you have before, because you go back, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but you usually go back and do exactly what you're doing right now, where you think through well, if we're going to open up this door, we probably have to have some more things in place because the board's concerned. But if we open up that door, well, then let's have this said. And you kind of draft some ideas so we have more than two choices that accurately take into account what our concerns are, and then you brainstorm some ways to alleviate those concerns. So I think kind of where we are right now, if it's all right with you, is we kind of send you back with your team to bring this forward again with some additional ideas of how you might address that based on your expertise. Does that, to the board and to you, Kelly, seem a good direction to go?
Absolutely.
All right, and what does the board think? Does anybody have a better idea? Because I'm certainly open to that. All right, this was a great discussion.
There are more considerations.
I know we're not done, but I'm just saying that so far this has been a great discussion.
This is a really good discussion.
And also I want to say thank you so much for actually starting us out with two options, because that gave us something to hit the ground running on and talking about, because sometimes we don't get that. So that focused the conversation. I really do appreciate that.
You're welcome.
All right. Can I make a suggestion? How about if we take, you can stay a little bit longer, yes? Okay, so before we continue and move on to the next one, how about if we take maybe a 10-minute break or so, and then come back and continue the presentation and the discussion? Would that meet to everyone's pleasure? All right, so we are at 11. I'll tell you what, let's come back at, what do you think? Oh, Dr. Bolson, I'm sorry, before we break, you had a comment?
Yeah, I was just going to suggest, if we're coming back with recommendations around this, would it be reasonable to ask, I think this is probably a question for Kelly, to just reach out to the certification people and some of the LEAs for a couple of anecdotes that might support what we're experiencing in this area?
Absolutely.
Because I think, I know that we always come up with those examples that are the hardest ones, and I think they could really inform this conversation if we just had a couple of those.
Most definitely.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So if it meets the pleasure of the board, how about if we take a 15-minute break? We'll come back at 11:03. Is that good? All right. All right. Thank you. So we'll come back around 11:03. Thank you. All right, everybody, welcome back. Hopefully you had a great break. And now we're going to continue on with the next part of the presentation. Okay, and we're ready when you are.
Just make sure we're on the right slide. Okay, so the next requirement for professional or coursework, the pedagogy, excuse me, I'm sorry. The Fine Arts Work Group was recommending 18 college credits or continuing professional development credits to include the following 5 areas: instructional design and strategies for effective teaching, differentiated instruction and supports for diverse learners, human development and learning theory, assessment for learning, and the 5th and final topic is classroom management and inclusive environments. The subcommittee had some differences in the coursework recommendations, and we did some pretty extensive research and conversation around what is offered right now in the state, what is accessible to educators, and then also some of the recommended topics for the fine arts area. Fine arts work group are incorporated in specific courses. And so the 18 credits of coursework that the subcommittee is recommending include methods of teaching, introduction to special education, human growth and development, assessment of learning, literacy in the content area, and then finally, culturally responsive teaching, multicultural education, and strategies for multilingual learners. So again, one of those 3 would suffice for that final 3 credits. The department is asking the board to consider the following: standardizing the pedagogy coursework across the content areas for both transcript analysis routes. In addition, establishing a standardized total number of credits, so either 15 credits for 5 courses or 18 for 6. As a reminder, the subcommittee is recommending 18 credits, so 3 credits in each one of those 6 courses. Also, the department wants to ensure that these new educators are having exposure to foundational special education knowledge. And so that is one of the reasons why we are asking to standardize those classes. In addition to that, require literacy instruction. So this is, a callback to the former transcript analysis route where there was literacy coursework, but in this case, it will be 3 credits of literacy in the content area. And then also taking some time and ensuring that the coursework is available in Maryland. I do want to call out again the subcommittee's work. Those 6 courses or topics are readily available in a few of our community colleges, but just across the state in general. And that is one of the reasons why the language for that 6th option includes 3 different areas. It's reflective of what is offered right now. In addition, ensuring that the topic, identifying the topic, and then that language aligns with what's available right now in the IHE space, and avoid combining topic areas for the requirements that will not be offered in the same course. So we had a lot of conversation about like classroom management and where that is offered. And so classroom management is a strategy. And so we do see it in some places as a standalone course, but it is integrated into methods of teaching right now as well. So that's where you see those differences. So again, our consideration for the board would be to standardize the coursework across both transcript analysis routes, and I will open it up for discussion.
All right. Go ahead, Dr. Shugler.
Thank you. I'm going to work backwards and start with number 6 under the subcommittee recommendation, just to share how we landed on the 3, because I think people may want to know. Culturally responsive teaching was really important and is important, as we know. That term lives in various courses when we looked at the availability of courses across IHEs. as is teaching multilingual learners. We were thinking about the recommendations from the multilingual learner work group, and because some of the strategies are cross-cutting, that is why you'll also see the term multicultural education for number 6. And only in a few cases were classroom management sort of named in isolation. And so I just wanted to just add that when we looked across courses in the state for folks who maybe wanted to know that. A lot of discussion on what to give up and what to keep. And that's also why it's 18 credits. The ideal was not 18 credits. It was just figuring out, okay, so if we're not going to do one of these, which? And so we did get from maybe 24 down to 18. So that's just a little bit more background and discussion that might be helpful for the group. And yes, I just wanted to add that. Let me also say from the work group recommendation that there's some nuance in the titling for the fine arts group that doesn't necessarily exist in the secondary education space. These courses would be hard to find at a lot of the IHEs, and so we were using some of the traditional language, traditional meaning historical, from the previous requirements because they are ready and available. Thanks.
All right, anyone else? Is there, forgive me if I missed anything, but is there anything in the, sure, is there anything in the subcommittee recommendations of the ones that are listed that's not in the work group recommendations or vice versa? Because it looks as though, like, for example, if you were saying classroom management generally falls into methods of teaching, so that seems to be covered. Is there anything where there's a mismatch there that I'm not seeing?
So the only, and please members jump in if I miss something, the only addition that you see from the subcommittee is that last number 6.
Okay.
So we feel pretty comfortable, and in complete disclosure, we looked at the fine arts work group recommendations during our own discussions as a subcommittee because we wanted to make sure that they were aligned. And we felt comfortable with what we ended up with because all of the other content is there. It's just called something that is more accessible and reasonable to find. We felt strongly that we needed to add number 6. And given the fine arts work group did recommend 18 credits, although they only recommended 5 areas, which if you do course by course is 15 credits, it aligned nicely.
Yep, and 6 also seems to mirror what we established for PDPs, some too, I noticed. So you can hear echoes of that. All right, so it's my assumption then that, and we can certainly continue the discussion, but it looks like the wording of the subcommittee recommendations meets with the approval of the board, if I'm not misunderstanding. Dr. Paulson? Yeah, and if you can come off mic, come off mute.
On my side, I'm unmuted. Am I right? All right?
Yep, you're good. We can hear you now.
Okay, thanks. I heard what Dr. Shockley said about classroom management, but as we're establishing an expectation here, is this something, I think management needs to be explicitly within these 6. So I know there's this concern about combining topics, but it sounds like what we did was looked at what's available already in IHEs. But on the school system side, with all of these topics, the area that our conditional or alternatively certified people run into, their greatest issue is always management. I say always, in a high percentage of cases. So I guess I would just suggest that, we don't want it to be something that, in some places it shows up in methods, in some places it shows up somewhere else. That's something I think needs to be explicitly in. So either we change one of the standards to say that we have it, or we ask that IHEs look at modifying one of these 6 courses to ensure it's always in there. And then we can put it in the title, because I just think that's too important a topic. Because I agree, these are all important, but I also would not want to see us go to 21 or 24 credits. But we need to make sure, so even if it's changing methods to, to clearly include management. So.
And I see a lot of head nods as you say that. I see Dr. Dyson also, your counterpart also nodding her head. Ebony?
Yes. Sorry, I'm in two places. I'm in too many places. Thank you, Dr. Bolson. I wanted to just add that we ended on transcript analysis, but it was not where we started. We started looking at the NTAS standards, actually, and we're trying to find a route other than transcript analysis, in particular because of this importance of classroom management. And so certainly this is where we wanted to bring the conversation to see if this group has where you think we could, merge it in the recommendation within the 18 credits. They're just, so we did not start with what's available. We started in the other direction. So with that in mind, we could certainly name it if that is important for all of us. It is important for all of us. It's just not available. So with that in mind, I would love to know where we believe we could put it or what we think we could merge so that we don't get to 21 credits. There are all kinds of ways that we could sort of like remix these courses particularly. I only remember this course being a standalone, actually in maybe one place. And we looked at community colleges as well. And so I invite others to think about how we might bring this in. And it is interwoven in many places when we looked at the descriptions of courses as it is a strategy. And we collaborate with school districts for our interns for this particular content multiple times, coupled with our standalone courses at my IHE. And so we believe it is important. So certainly invite it. And Sophie, if you want to, Ms. Fitzpatrick, if you want to add, or Kelly wants to add something, or others want to add, we agree. We just want to think about how that is. But there was a reason why we didn't name it in the same ways as the work group.
Okay, so I'm glad Dr. Bolson raised that up because we did have extensive discussion about classroom management and all agreed that it absolutely needs to be included. What we found in our research is that, and I just looked it up again, the only community college in Maryland that I can find that still offers a standalone course is Anne Arundel, and I'm going to read you the description. Examines classroom management strategies for current teachers and paraprofessionals, emphasizes integration of effective teaching techniques with appropriate classroom strategies, examines classroom and lesson planning, principles of effective instruction, and teacher-student relationships. So what we found in our research is the transition has been made to present classroom management as part of methods.
Well, then I'll just add, and I think just being aware, we talked about human growth and development, or, I guess just human growth and development is also an essential part of being a successful manager of the classroom, understanding where your specific students are. My question was going to be about the ED TPA. Does that portfolio ask candidates to come up with a philosophy on or a practice around classroom management, and would that be a way to achieve that?
Short answer, yes. At TPA scorer here. Short answer, yes. Yes, it does. In the very beginning where you articulate your classroom context and profile, you explain your students, you explain the context of your classroom and how you engage students. So it does show up in the TPA. I can look and see what the rubrics require. Also, the IHEs, even though it is not explicitly stated, and as Kelly mentioned, the NTAS standards also have different components that align, and all of our IHEs in Maryland use NTAS standards.
All right, Debbie.
Thanks. So I actually do teach a standalone free credit classroom management course and have for the last 30 some years, but it changes each year. So please don't one. But I just want to point out that many of the IHEs are, and certainly at Towson, we are working to infuse all sorts of blueprint topics into our other classes, whether it's going to have the term classroom management in the title. Everybody is working hard to infuse all of the things that Blueprint is asking us to cover in our classes.
And I just also want to bring up the point that while we understand at our IHEs where there are programs that classroom management may be a standalone, and I do know that CCBC also has a standalone classroom management course, and that is because it's still one of the requirements for occupational experience as well. With that being said, that's only 2 community colleges, and if we're talking about accessibility for individuals that are on a transcript analysis route and attempting to keep costs down for them as well, it's not many options. And so in our research, again, classroom management in many places is now a part of methods of teaching.
Okay, Dr. Bolson again.
Yeah, I get so one thing I'm not as aware of, when I earned my admin degree, I pieced together courses from multiple universities. And I don't know how many other sort of licensures you can do in this state now where you can piece together things from other places. Because it could be that, management shows up in one course in one university and so anyway, that was not the best route for me to take at the time, but I didn't realize the detriment. So that's just one scenario that is a concern. I guess the other thing for me is, the universities do, modify the courses, as the needs, particularly in the state, change. So when it comes to guidance around courses, I'm not so committed to there being a standalone management course, but ensuring that, in the guidance that, in order to have a comprehensive methods course, it needs to include blah, blah, blah. Because I can see the management needing to be, like, you need to find it in the syllabus for methods, for special education, for human growth and development, for cultural responsive, and all. I mean, I certainly see the benefit of having it embedded, but is there some place then in how MSDE works through what the requirements are for those courses in the state of Maryland? Is that a different route to go? I don't know how that's done really.
Are you asking specifically just about the licensure process and looking at the coursework that is required for transcript analysis? Because, in our research, we were trying again to align the topics to also some of the titles of the courses that are offered around the state. With that being said, in the licensure process for any area that has a transcript analysis route, the specialists will ask for course descriptions or syllabi if there is a question, if something is included in a course. It is a lot of work, with that being said, but we will allow educators to supply that information to ensure that the requirement is being met.
I guess what I'm picturing, and maybe this doesn't exist, in our, so what goes into COMAR might have the list of these 6 topics, but then there's, and I get my words mixed up because in Harvard we call these procedures, but I know it's different at the state level. If someone at the university wants to say, okay, does what we're doing meet this requirement for methods of teaching? What are the things that need to be in there? I get the sense you're also looking at accreditation standards, what you just talked about. But is there a next level of detail that says, this course is, meets the requirements for the state of Maryland if it includes X, Y, Z? Is that published anywhere?
Kelly?
Sure. So no. And correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Bolson, but I think where this potentially is going is what the subcommittee grappled with the entire time we met, which is there's a reason why we moved away from the transcript analysis pathway to licensure. And it is because it is, as you can see, course-based. And there is no quality control over courses. We put this in regulation. We will take courses from any accredited institution that offers that course. And one course is going to be vastly different than another, whether it's within Maryland or within the country or within the world. It is why we base our teacher preparation programs on standards, national standards. So when Dr. Shockley mentions the INTASC standards, that is, the pedagogical set of national standards that all of our programs are required to align to, and where we're moving to in the induction movement as well. So we did struggle with this, and we talked about it at length. I think, and I'll ask my colleagues to jump in here, I think where we landed was we recognize that the best way is to align to standards, but we could not identify a way in which we could do that in an efficient, ready to go, accessible, community college based way that would be ready in a short amount of time, which is why we came to the recommendations that we came to.
So I guess with that explanation, understanding the limitations of this a little bit, then I would maybe go back to a different recommendation, which is identify which of these 6 to replace with something called method or management, like classroom management. Because, I suspect, particularly community colleges, I know it appears to only be offered in a few places, but if this was the standard, I have great confidence that the colleges would turn around and offer that. But I think it's just too important a topic to leave as, just one piece of a couple of classes.
If I can just add a little bit to this, I'm gonna read INTASC Standard 3 learning environments, if you'll indulge me. INTASC Standard 3 is one of the most common standards in teacher education programs and in the CPD courses that our LEAs offer when engaging and working with teachers in their induction year. And it is in 90% of any methods class from any approved program. I'm just going to read it, or maybe not 90%, but in many. Standard number 3, this is broad learning environments. The teacher works with others to create environments that support individual and collaborative learning and that encourage positive social interaction, active engagement in learning, and self-motivation. That's the broad standard, and their performances, essential knowledge, and critical dispositions. So as we are figuring out where to land on this important topic that you have brought back to bear, I also just wanted to add that for us. And so that is the kind of conversation we started having around these standards. For example, there are also competencies that are required, but I just wanted to share that the reason, as Kelly also has explained, that we went back to this transcript analysis is because in looking at the descriptions of the methods courses and as well as the human growth and development courses, we understood that a lot of the content that lives or that used to live in the standalone classroom management courses has evolved and been distilled in these 2 courses with some of the language that I just described. So I hope that gives us a little bit of context and is helpful as we navigate this important work together. Thanks.
And so as a reminder, looking at the former transcript analysis route, we did require 21 credits. And so we do have an option. While I know many of us don't want to go that way, and I know the Fine Arts Work Group also wanted to stay at 18, if we really feel like this needs to be called out separately, we can go to 21 credits. That is an option for us. That would not change anything because, the former regulations had a transcript analysis route to certification that was 21 credits. We can also consider looking at eliminating one of the topics. And I know that would be really hard, but we have some options and some flexibility if we wanted to include classroom management as a call out, as Dr. Bolson pointed out.
Good
Karen.
morning. If I could, I just wanted to associate myself with Dr. Bolson. And I think what we're talking about is theory to practice. So in theory, I think it sounds great that, classroom management, proactive strategies, or whatever you want to call it, is integrated. But I think what we see, especially with, I mean, I have almost 300 conditional teachers. In practice, I don't see the evidence that they've really gained strategies for many of them. There are some who are phenomenal, but there's some once they get in the classroom are struggling. So, and I don't know how we account for that in this conversation, but I do think what we're talking about is really what happens in practice, not just what happens in theory. And I think that's the disconnect in the conversation right now for us as practitioners and supervisors of many of these unconditional teachers. It's just we don't really see evidence that they've gained a lot in that coursework.
I just want to
Ms.
clarify.
Yoho?
Oh, I just want to clarify for Dr.
Sure.
Dyson real quick. You're saying that conditional teachers took a methods class and that or a human development class, and they did not take away classroom management. Is that right? I just want to make sure, Dr. Dyson.
What I'm saying is it's a challenge. So as we talk about these alternative pathways, however, the courses that they're taking, because conditional teachers still have to take many courses in order to become certified. I just see it as a big challenge. We have a huge induction program in Frederick County, and that is one of the main concerns. And it is some of the reason why some of them decide not to continue to seek the full certification or licensure. So I'm just offering that as a reason why we probably think differently and feel so strongly about it being a called out course because of what we see in practice.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Thank you, Dr. Dyson.
Yes, so that's why I always appreciate superintendent's perspective. We have a former superintendent on our May board as well, because they get right to the practice and the practicalities. And I'm going back to my days of having mentors, and they would do these beautiful lessons that you knew they spent hours on, and then they would not teach the children. You'd have to talk to them about, you got to teach the children, not just the lesson. And I think Darren, you and I might have had this conversation a long time ago. We were seeing a lot of military people come into the teaching profession, and why weren't they having success? They had commanded troops, and now they're coming in, and a bunch of kids can't be handled. Aren't you impressed with my knowledge? And so I think it's absolutely right. And I was trying to figure all these ways. Just one thing it says, including. So we're kind of implying that those are all classes, but separate classes, but it just says including these ideas. If there's a seventh, seventh Roman numeral, couldn't they somehow, if you find classes that combine these, no matter what it is that not copacetic? Sorry.
No, this is what we struggled with, because this is the challenge with transcript analysis. It's why we like standards-based coursework, because you have the flexibility to hit those standards in a number of ways. And the only way to do a transcript analysis, literally a credit count pathway, is to count a certain number of credits in each area. So I will say that at the end of the day, if we do decide to move forward with a transcript analysis pathway, 21 credits is 7 courses. It's not a tremendous amount of coursework. It's I think reasonable. It is what we had in place for decades. So I know that we were all shooting for a 6-course option, but if we're not comfortable that all of what needs to be covered is being covered in those 6 courses, then by all means, I think we should recommend more. And if 7 isn't enough, then we need to really start thinking about whether this is the right option.
Nikki?
I did want to add to the space in our discussions is that, especially when it came to the alt license path, is that we wanted to ensure that we had rigor, but that folks were able to access the courses they needed to get started right now, not in a year. And one of the challenges that comes as we have these discussions is, if it's only offered in Anne Arundel, is it offered online? Can someone who's in Hartford or Frederick access Anne Arundel community college for that one course, or Towson. I don't know if is that a virtual option. And so I think I'm saying this to Kelly and team. How do we make, if we're adding that, I'm all for if we need to add that additional course, but it needs to be accessible. And if it's only in 2 or 3 locations and it's not accessible, they cannot get licensed because they couldn't find the course. So that becomes the next challenge we have to kind of reconcile in that. But I agree, classroom management is if you don't have it, you're out. I mean, it just is not realistic. They can't manage.
And I guess I would also add to that, in addition to accessibility, is I'm thinking about the ordering of when people are taking courses. Because if they're able to take the courses whenever, then conditionally certified teachers who are saving the classroom management class for later are still going to have those same challenges until they take that class.
Okay, I think I have an option for us. So we know and understand that classroom management is important, and we know and understand that classroom management needs to happen not at the end. And listening to what our superintendents are sharing, I mentioned that at my institution we work with a school district for classroom management for our school districts. For our interns, and I wonder if we could, if we change it to the 7 courses, which we were trying not to do, but we may have to because we all agree that this is important. Even if it's not that in terms of accessible, if we use some of the language from the work group recommendation and have it read 18 credits of pedagogical coursework and or CPD credits, perhaps there are some options for some collaboration or some options for our LEAs who may have some teams. I know your budgets are strapped, so I'm just trying to think of a way for us to do this and make it accessible, to collaborate and have the courses available. Because if we vote on it or if we agree to it and it's not available, then we're still not helping ourselves. But if we can think about ways to make it available, and for me, CPDs move a little faster than a new course, and for institutions or even at 2-year institutions, I wonder, I'd love to hear what our superintendents think about that as an option. Certainly happy to have more conversations about that and supporting that work together. But I feel like if we all believe that this is important, I certainly do. Just trying to figure out how to have that work happen. To me, that is a way to make it accessible and available and important. So that would be to make it 7 courses, include it, and include the language of a CPD. So that's what comes to mind for now.
All right. Any thoughts on that? Including CPD in addition to coursework.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really smart. I agree with Dr. Dyson that it didn't matter how much theory I received in any course. It was a completely different story once you got into the classroom. Like, I was an amazing teacher before I had a classroom to manage. Exactly. I'm wondering about the mentoring requirements that we have across the state, and if that would be, I mean, I feel like that would be a more effective place to help people develop their classroom management skills. Are there any, I mean, this is a silly question for me to ask. I'm technically a mentor at my school, but it's been rolled out very, there's a lot left to be desired by the mentor program that happened at our school this year. Is there like a schedule of mentoring topics, or like, could that be incorporated as a different way to help early career teachers improve their classroom management rather than a course? Because I do think the practical application would be a lot more useful, a better use of everybody's time and money.
Well, if I can address that, I do think historically we did try and address that because we did lengthen the internship. That we knew that if you had a year-long internship, you were there from the beginning, the middle, the end, and so forth. It gave you much more time to do that. What I didn't necessarily see is when we lengthen the internship, that gives you more time to actually, in an actual environment, practice the skills that you have been taught. So I think in your graduate or undergraduate experience, having a course that actually teaches you some methodology of classroom control. And then when you do the internship, you actually begin the practical application. But you don't teach the surgeon to do the surgery with the body in front of them during the actual surgery. You teach them ahead of time, and then they practice and on a corpse, and then you practice. You see what I'm saying? There's a gradual, but nothing, you can't just throw some in without having them they have to have that knowledge first. I can teach in my graduate course at Mount St. Mary's, this is how proximity works. I can show it, but they need to know that before they go into their internship, because that's where they try it and they hone their skills. So that's kind of where I see the difference. So I do see the importance of the internship, but I also see the importance of an actual classroom setting by which the skills are taught first and then you put it into practice. And, it occurs to me as we go through this conversation is much greater than pertains to just the arts, because we're really having a discussion across the board here. Like, is classroom management so important that it needs to be a standalone? And we have tinkered with things like this before, even as a board, and, certainly we've rethought the way we teach reading and literacy and things like that, to the point where there's much more of an emphasis on it, both standalone and integrated. So we can rethink these things. It's going to be bigger than the conversation today, but it's obviously rising to the top as being one of the reasons that we have teacher turnover, as Dr. Dyson just pointed out. Sure. Go ahead, Josh.
I think someone was before me. I can't remember who.
No, it was me. It was me, Kim. I've been listening to the conversation and I was wanting to jump in, but I was hearing everybody and they were kind of saying the same things I was thinking. And so I wanted to be additive and not repetitive. But on the same note, since I unmiked, I might as well just go. The idea of, as a classroom teacher now who's approaching 20 years, and I know there's other teachers on this board who can sympathize with what I was saying and what you guys were already saying about having the classroom coursework and then going into the practical. I learned coursework, but I did not learn how to manage my class until I was doing it. And as someone who also mentored teachers who were, doing their mentorship in my classroom and such, they weren't learning it until they had to do it. So I agree that there should be a class with practical knowledge so they can get that terminology and understand and kind of see that modeling. But I think outside of this, what we're moving towards is maybe thinking about what needs to happen at the local level, like having some continuing professional development for that conditional teacher, or not conditional teacher, but when you become a teacher, you still have 1 or 2 years, 3 years in different, in different locals of probation, that they have to have like some sort of continuing practical course, because there can be a teacher who went through all that coursework and you go in and you still suck when it comes to classroom management. It's just something that has to be practiced. And so I don't know I think our discussion is well and good, but what we're looking for, I don't think is going to be answered in this space. Like it's something that has to be done in the years that you are teaching to learn how to be good classroom management.
And I just want to add, that is one of the reasons why both groups opted for those options for teaching ability, to ensure that that rigor is still there, and they are being evaluated on the content that they are learning in the courses, since the state is moving towards, practical application. So in the past, it was just, the PLT, and that is going away. And so those three options that, while I understand the concerns around the 1-year evaluation, but those three options provide practical evaluation of what they are learning. But I agree with Kelly. Bumping up to 21 credits, if we wanted to specifically call out classroom management, would not be a major shift.
Okay, Josh?
So I was just going to piggyback on what everyone was saying about, and I was thinking the same time Ms. Stanton brought it up, about how we have mandated induction programs and mentor teachers per the blueprint. So if we incorporate a CPD course idea along with graduate credits, could that be done during the induction program? Like it could be more course based and course hours earned versus just the traditional mentoring that happens. So they're actually doing coursework and they're applying what they're learning on the job. So it's on the job training, like we've been talking about, where you have to actually apply the pedagogy strategies. You can't just be like, oh, I learned this, but I don't know how to apply it.
And I would make the argument that for the 2 transcript analysis pathways, you know, that is the point, right? You're on a conditional license. You're getting all this content knowledge and pedagogy, well, not content knowledge, but the pedagogy and applying it while you're in the classroom. But I do understand the argument, and going back to what Kelly said on why, you know, it's not necessarily related. It's kind of pieced together for a transcript analysis route. But with that being said, we did have the conversation in the subcommittee about CPDs and including that as an option, because we looked at our current offerings by the state, and I do know there is coursework for special ed that was recently developed because of the requirements for specialists and administrators and supervisors, as well as multilingual learners. So there are options, and CPD coursework can be developed fairly quickly.
Go ahead, Kelly.
So I'm glad we're talking about induction, because I think that we're right on the money at this point. So licensure is, you know, what you earn to allow you to practice the profession and enter the profession. Unfortunately, 10% of our workforce is conditionally licensed, so we don't have the luxury of the, theoretical first, practical, and then the employment. We just don't have that luxury. And so it's challenging, because now we have 10% of the teacher population that's being inducted while they're being prepared. And so one of the things that you'll see in the drafted regulations that we have taken to the state board and published in the registry is really beefing up induction and there are more requirements than we've ever had before in this drafted round of amendments. And we've distinguished the conditional teacher. So really looking at, do they understand what they need to be prepared, and how are we assisting them in getting there, not just leaving it to them to do it. So it is a dilemma. And I think that it is a great point that, classroom management is a really good example of something that really needs to happen hands-on to really understand how to do it. And I don't think we can put everything on licensure. I think we have to acknowledge, and it sounds like we are, that, you can put to some extent on licensure, and should, but at the end of the day, once you get into that employment role, like, the learning should not stop. And so another thing that you'll see in the induction regulations is we've really kind of specified and micromanaged, like, you've got to hit these topics. You've got to be aligned to the in-task standards. So we're aligning induction to in-task. So that really is the vision, is that it's a continuum. So regardless of whether you're prepared traditionally, alternatively, or you go through something like a transcript analysis, you get in the door, and then we need that induction to take over or happen simultaneously. And so aligning those standards.
All right, so I think where we are right now, and correct me if I'm wrong, there seems to be a general support for adding classroom management to that list. And there does seem to be general support for adding CPD to the beginning. And there does seem to be support for moving to 21. All right, am I misunderstanding any of that? All right, that sounds good. All right, now looking at the time, we were at 12:15. It's 12:13 right now. You do have one more slide
One
to present.
slide, which we have talked about already.
So I'll tell you, how
promise.
about we do that, and then we'll start to set the agenda for our next meeting, and then pick this up again, obviously.
So the final slide is for considerations around test of teaching ability. And so both of the work groups recommended submitting a passing score on the EdTPA, submitting an effective year-end evaluation from a Maryland local school district, state-operated school, or approved non-public school, and then the final option for completing an improved induction program. Our consideration was for the board to adopt as recommended, but We have already talked about this a little bit, and there are concerns around the second option. So I know we don't have much time for discussion right now, but I have felt that we are leaning towards, or the board is leaning towards option 1 and option 3, if I'm correct.
Go ahead, Kelly.
So just a couple more things to throw out there to consider while we're having this discussion. I don't have the answers. One is I want to acknowledge the fact that there is a $300 price tag to the EdTPA, and it is something that we consider when we talk about this. This group is not going to have the option of enrolling in a program that's nationally accredited and they can use their own portfolio. So that's one thing to consider. The second thing to consider is the EdTPA is designed to measure readiness to step into the classroom. Again, we don't have the luxury with this population of doing this prior to them stepping into their role as a teacher. So I think the question becomes, and I totally understand the concern about the standardization. We do not have a standardization of evaluations across local education agencies. That is a fact. We do have regulations that are very high level, but we do have 24 different flavors of evaluations. But I guess the question that I'm always asking is, through the lens of, are you ready to step into the classroom? And if that test is designed to measure that, what other measures can we potentially use? And we don't have to limit it to these 3, but that's kind of where my lens is.
Go ahead, Dr. Woodward.
You said the sky was the limit, right? So I just know that there are sometimes, stuff that gets in the way of the evaluation, right? Like if someone misses one date on it, that person is entitled to an effective evaluation, even though they were potentially having some challenges. However, the administrator just didn't get them done on time, or there were some compliance issues, right? What if it was more than one? One seems like a stab in the dark that the person could be great. There could be compliance issues. What if we had to show continuity across more than 1 year for an effective evaluation? To me, that would show some continuity in someone's skill set.
All right, point well taken. Anyone else? All right, so I think going forward, where we are now is we'll continue this discussion. As always, take this back to our constituent group, share, get feedback, come back with more robust conversation to match what we had today. Kelly, if I'm understanding, I think what our charge is now, you'll come back with some expanded language for demonstration of content knowledge based on our feedback. We'll also kind of see the adoption of what we said in pedagogical coursework, those things that I suggested we add, and then we'll continue our discussion on the test of teaching ability as we come back. I'm sorry? And that, of course, is leading us now to the July agenda. I believe we will meet in July, if that's advisable to the group. We have a lot of important work to do, but I believe our meeting date, you said, is the 10th. Is that correct, Kelly? Because normally, I think, falls on July 3rd, and no one wants to do that because, obviously, of the long weekend. So I believe initially when we set our dates, we moved it to the following Thursday, which I want to say is the 10th. We also agreed previously that that would be an online meeting. It will not be an in-person meeting. So we'll all be online for that because a lot of us will be scattered around for, obviously, July because it's summer. So we obviously have this part on the agenda again, of course, coming back to this discussion. The other thing, too, that I wanted to bring up, well, actually, I'll do this in a second after we set the agenda. Is there anything else other than the traditional items that we usually put on that someone wants to see on the agenda? All right. Now, Dr. Shockley and I did discuss the fact that some folks have asked us about the in-district pathway, which our board previous members of the board, some of you are included, had worked to initiate that. So I think it would be good for us to get a discussion on what was the criteria that has been set for an in-district pathway, and just sort of some updated information on the review process, how that works, and what's in the pipeline right now. So that would, of course, be informational only. But at some point, we can include that. And Kelly, that doesn't have to be at the next meeting. I think we've got a full agenda here. But that's something to sort of keep in mind. Is there anything else that folks would like to see on July or future agendas? Okay, well, that's fine. I think that's pretty full as it is, so it's fine not to add to it. All right, so I believe we have an agenda. Kelly, did you have anything you needed to add for an agenda? All right, sounds good. Were there any objections or additions to the letter to Dr. Wright and Mr. Leggett?
I wanted to add something really quickly about the letter. When we had this conversation last time, we talked about it not just being teachers, but also looking at school counselors and why they're leaving. So I'm not sure that that needs to be part of the letter, but I hope that's part of the conversation about other educator groups that are leaving as well.
All right, I think we could probably add an "and" in there probably. That's a good point. All right, anybody else? Thank you, Ms. Carpenter. All right, seeing no other additions or deletions to the letter, then we'll go ahead and work on sending that out. All right, anything else for the good of the group? All right, thank you all for an excellent, and thank you for a wonderful presentation. I really do appreciate that. It was so well organized and got us right down to business, so that was wonderful. All right,
Thank you so much.
Anything else for the good of the group before we adjourn? All right, without objection, everyone have a wonderful time between now and the next meeting. Have a great close to the school year, those of you that are closing things out. And we'll see everybody back here online in July. All right, without objection, I will call the meeting adjourned. All right, meeting adjourned. All right, good day, everyone. Thank you for your work today.